Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Urison.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today is a former Amazonian. We're going to hear straight from the horse's mouth. He was the first external hire in Amazon advertising team, and it managed almost $100 million in advertising budget for 150 brands. So you want to talk about scale, he understands exactly how to scale something and how to manage. So he's today currently the VP of Advertising and Operations at Elevate Brands, which is an aggregator. And he will soon be presiding over almost $500 million in sales. And when he's not playing Amazon, he likes playing chess and motorcycles and movies. Also, ironically, he does stand-up from time to time. So the least person you would expect to be a stand-up. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Tony Morales. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Hello. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's I always love talking to former Amazonians because you guys have a certain way of approaching things and then certain way of handling the communications. So it's always, you can tell, it's a well-conditioned way of handling situations. So you run the operations at Elevate Brands. And at Elevate Brands, I understand you will soon have 80 brands that you'll be managing, right?
Yeah, we just went through a acquisition by a company called Seller X, and so but the merger of the two companies will land us with around 80 brands and have us being the second largest aggregator in the space. So it's very exciting.
Cool. And you preside over the whole thing, and at least you will be presiding over the whole thing. And so tell us, share with us some of your secrets to manage such a large operation effectively.
Well, I think one of the biggest thing is to, be able to put your advertising operations on autopilot. That's the best way to scale an operation of size.
So tell us, what does that entail, putting your operation on autopilot?
Well, there's three core themes to that for me. One is building an effective offshore team. Two is having cost-effective software, and the third is really a detailed campaign optimization cadence.
So what I'm hearing from you is the team. First of all, you build a team, but ideally it's offshore from cost standpoint. But at the same time, you cannot let them run around as they feel like it. So you have processes, well-defined processes for them to operate, right?
Correct.
And then you don't do anything by hand, but you use software that runs on sequences that are pre-configured. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think it's mostly software, but it's depending on the nuance, a little mixture of both. Yes, yeah. But the cadence takes care of that.
Okay. All right. So fine. So for in this conversation, this is really for our listeners. Let me just set up our conversation here. So we're going to get into how to build your team, especially by using offshore people, how you identify who's good, who's not so good, based on different Amazon-related tasks. And then we're going to discuss how to create your internal processes that need to be operated by the offshore people. Of course, here you want to make sure that they will incorporate who they are into who you want them to be, because everybody comes to the table with certain amount of knowledge and certain culture. And here we are mixing it all up where we want to be the beneficiary of it. And finally, it's all about the use of software for using cadences. And so that way you're not doing anything manually. So these are all things that we will discuss. And also in the process, we're going to discuss some of the metrics that every seller should stay on top of so that you know what's going on. So let's jump right into it with the team. So tell us, first of all, give us your take on what are the areas where you should bring somebody in, and distinct areas. What are the expertise areas that will take to build an Amazon operation and run an Amazon operation?
I mean, if you're looking at, Amazon in general, right? I think you can break it down into a bunch of different categories. I mean, today, we'll talk primarily about advertising, but right, advertising is one piece. Now, when I think about advertising, one of the analogies I like to use is I think of it like being in a rowboat, right? And so you're in a boat, you got your 2 oars in the water, and you're kind of rowing this boat. And the one oar is your Amazon ads, right? And what you're doing with that oar, with those Amazon ads, is you're capturing and directing the existing Amazon traffic. So having a person or a team to do that is, I think, important. And I guess any of these things, if you're running an Amazon business, if it's you, you're doing all the things, right? So first of all, you're doing all the things. And so as I have this conversation, it's as you grow as a business and can afford support, you can outsource things. And many of these things, some are highly skilled, some are not. A lot of things are like, I have a guy that cuts my lawn, and I have a lady that cleans my house. This isn't, and I do that because, one, both of them do those jobs better than I would do. First of all, I don't want to do those jobs. They also do those jobs better than I would do those jobs. And the amount of time it would take me to do it, I would rather spend, doing other things or focusing on my business, because I'll make more money with that time, right? And so as we think about all the different operations in our business, obviously advertising is one, inventory management is another, creative and listing optimization is another piece. If your business is, bigger than Amazon, you may have a retail specialty or need to work on your D2C site. And having somebody to help you with each of these pieces, is important. And I think, if we were to break down the Amazon business really simply, it's, create a great listing, make sure you're managing your inventory well so that you're not, paying unnecessary fees, and then get as many people as possible to look at the product. And if you do that and you have something good, people will buy it. And you just rinse and repeat. But I would say, back to the rowboat analogy, that other oar, right? Oar number one is capturing and directing Amazon traffic. That other oar, which I think is even much more difficult, that most people struggle with, is driving additional traffic, to your Amazon listing. And so how do you get people that, say, aren't on Amazon, to go there and to look for your thing? And so there's a number of different ways to do that. That could be anything from, Google ads, affiliate marketing, different influencer stuff, things you can do with organic or paid social, YouTube videos, creating a blog post, but anything that anything that I would say moves in the brand awareness direction and getting people to look, because regardless of where you're selling, I think I heard a stat, it's like almost 80% of shoppers, even when they're in the grocery store, right, or any store that they're in, they look at Amazon.com to do price checks, right? So before they buy an item, they do a price check on Amazon to see, is this, the right price, or does Amazon have a lower price, before they, decide, where they're going to purchase. And so if you're in a position where you have your PPC in a good place on autopilot and you're doing all the right things, then when you're driving additional traffic, one hand feeds the other, and the business will grow. So I think, all of that in context, if you get to a place in your business where you want to focus as the business owner, on things like branding or new product development or channel expansion, right? There's other things, for you to do with your time. And so things like cutting the grass or cleaning the house, if you will, I would say, some of the other things for Amazon that have to get done, right? My grass needs to get cut. If it doesn't get cut over time, it's 4 feet high and I have a problem, right? And so anyone who's serious about their Amazon business needs to have PPC as some component of their business. And so you're either going to run that yourself or you're going to outsource that. And so I think being able to do that, and being able to do that in a cost-effective way is really important. So yes, so that would be, and obviously that leads into how would you build, how do you find a cost-effective way to have someone else who's not you manage that? And then, and if you're not in a single brand, if you're a larger business, how do you do that at scale?
Yeah. So, Tony, one of the things that I struggle as a business owner, and I'm sure I'm not alone, it's the same for most people. You don't know everything. So you have to bring in people to do the work that you don't have the expertise in. So that's one. The second thing is, even if you know how to do something and you have the expertise in, as you put it, you're better off putting your time into something else. So where I struggle is this. Running PPC is such a specific kind of expertise. Clearly, for someone who learns it and then tries to run it, is not going to have any advantage over anybody, especially if you're launching a new listing and you need to be successful. So can you share with us some ways that Amazon sellers can outsource this job to someone, but at the same time, they have enough fundamental knowledge to be able to check what's going on, somewhat have awareness, rather than just, because that's what happens most of the times. You hire somebody for something that you don't know anything about, and then they think that they are, well, you think that they are doing the job, but actually they're not. So what can you share with us where sellers can stay on top of what they outsourced when it comes to PPC?
No, perfect. Yeah, I think a couple things. One, there's a bunch of different ways to spot check this. So, and it's the old adage of you take your car to the mechanic, and if you don't know what's wrong, how do you know you're not, they actually replaced a part, or the thing they say they need to get fixed actually needs to get fixed. So one, I think it's important for you to know your own product, your own inventory very well, right? Some people have one product, some people have 12 products, 20 products, 200 products. And so I think number one is to figure out how many products do you plan on advertising? I would say if you're going to sell it, you should probably advertise it. Sometimes businesses are in a situation where that can be cost prohibitive, so they can really only focus on, say, some of their top items or the items they want to push the most. So I would say know what you want to advertise, and know enough about Seller Central and the campaign manager that you can make sure and verify that the items you want advertised are actually being advertised, right? I think that's step one. Again, being familiar enough with the tool where when someone tells you they did something, I made an optimization, I created a campaign, you can actually look in there and you can see it. Inside the campaign manager, there is a history function where you can see any type of change history, right? And so if you go in there and you see, there you've had a meeting with somebody and you walked in, you don't see any changes between when you're looking and when your meeting was, then you know that nothing has happened. So whoever it was that's in charge, like hasn't done any work, right? And it's kind of, it's good. Like you can look and you can see, if the cleaning lady is vacuuming the floor, if the guy's mowed the lawn, if it's short, it got cut. If it's not, it didn't get cut, right? So it's a good verification mechanism. So I think those are two big things. One thing that is really interesting, is just in the environment that we have today, with the internet, we can find a lot of high quality talent overseas. And I've been doing this for the last 4.5 years, working with a lot of folks, particularly in, India and Eastern Europe, and the Philippines, folks who have, engineering degrees or 2 master's degrees or a PhD that are super intelligent, super smart, and just unfortunately due to their economic situation in their country, they just don't have access to, the kind of business opportunities that we may have here in the US. So you have these really brilliant folks that we can now be connected to, through Zoom and, the internet, and they can log in to the account and really help lean in and, do really good things for your Amazon business. One of the last things, or 2 last things I think I would say to finish your question, is think about pricing and incentives. So when you're working with an agency or outsourcing to an agency, are they charging you based on a percentage of spend, right? Or are they charging you based on, say, a percentage of return? And I think that really matters, because if you're being charged about a percentage of spend, regardless of what you do, that means the person that's working for you has no skin in the game, right? And all that, they did, and regardless of their performance, as long as they can convince you to keep spending or to spend more money, they're getting a cut based on how much you spend, right? And what's really interesting, and this happens, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about software, but when we think about agencies and we think about software, particularly in the Amazon space or the PPC space in general, it's like as you do more business and spend more money, they charge you more. And there's really, there's not a lot of other businesses I can think of where things operate that way. Typically when you're working, for a business, or you do things, the more you spend, the more you get for free, right? The more you eat at a restaurant, they bring you out free dessert. The more you spend at a restaurant, maybe they bring you a free drink or a free dessert or something like that. And so it's really interesting. And I think incentive alignment is very important. So if someone's charging on a percentage of spend, I would certainly be cautious. That means, to me, there's a lack of willingness to really be committed to what they're producing. And I'm sure that statement, if we were on a panel, could create an argument. But I think it's important. I think if somebody's charging you based on a percentage of return, they're going to be more active. They're just going to be more active. You're going to see a lot more activity out of them. They're going to be looking at your account more. They're really going to be trying to, they're now incentivized the same way you are by your business growing, right? Not by just you spending more money. So I think that's another piece. And then finally, I would say, thinking about this concept of branded versus non-branded spend. When I was in my previous company, we did a data analysis, and what we discovered is that only 16% of branded spend, or 16% of branded sales were actually incremental. And just so everybody's super clear, the difference between branded and non-branded spend, I would consider branded spend to be bidding on terms, which are your brand name or the name of the product, right? And so if you're Nike, right? So if it would be, if you're bidding on the word Nike, Nike tennis shoes, Air Jordans, all of those things I would consider branded terms. And so what we did and what we found and discovered in our analysis is that 84% of the time that you're spending money on those branded terms, the attributed sales that were reported were what we would call cannibalistic. So those were sales that would have happened anyway had you not bid on those terms. Branded terms, and so a non-branded term then for Nike would be running shoe, sneaker, tennis shoe, basketball shoe, high top, things like that. So something that is just obviously not associated with the brand or the specific names of the shoe, right? Now, because branded spend is highly cannibalistic, there are a lot of service providers, that will have you spend on branded because it inflates the ROI. Right. So if you're looking at, say, your ROAS, your return on ad spend, you are going to get the more money you spend on the larger percentage of your ad budget that goes to branded terms, the higher that's going to inflate your ROI, which makes that agency or service provider look better. So, what I would say for most folks, if your brand is small or relatively unknown, my opinion is, branded spend is really unnecessary. Right. And, because the people that are looking for you, they've heard of you, they know you, they're coming to buy, and I think, until your business, does reach, a large status where people are, seeing you as a threat and really trying to, cannibalize your customer base. I think most people have a long runway before they really need to lean in to branded spend. And I would say even when the time comes and you reach a level of maturity in your business where that's necessary, having that percentage of spend, be it's hard for me. I'd say 20 to 40% or less than 20%. Having it be the minority of the spend in your business is the right answer. And so again, that's just something to look out for. And in a lot of the analysis we've done, we've seen when we've turned off branded spend, there's relatively no change in top line sales. And when you start to press on that a lot more, again, there's relatively no change in top line sales. And so we can see, how that can be cannibalistic. So those are just 4 things. Looking at the branded spend, the compensation and incentive structure, making sure that you have a good understanding of the platform so that you can see, did somebody set up a campaign? Are they advertising your ASINs? And then just occasionally checking the change history just to make sure people are doing what they say they're doing. If you do those things, I think you can be in the trust but verify, sort of relationship and feel good about your service provider.
I have something important for all my listeners. Sellers lose money on lost or damaged inventory with Amazon, which can add up to a lot over a year. Did you know that there is a way to claim all your losses? Getida is the global leader in Amazon FBA auditing and reimbursements for Amazon FBA sellers worldwide. They deliver results with no upfront costs. They get paid only when you get paid. Visit www.getida.com/legends to learn more and sign up. And thanks to our friends at Getida, your first $400 in reimbursements will be free. That's www.getida.com/legends. And that's www.getida.com/legends. Well, this is so valuable. So I'm gonna now come back to you with some questions, especially on the fee structure, because this is so important. When I was an Amazon seller, people would come to me and I would offer revenue share for their services. I say, look, why don't you do the work and then just take a piece of the action, so you have a skin in the game? And they would not like that. And then once I started to grow and my sales became fairly significant and I became an 8-figure seller, what happened was, anytime, well, two things happened. First of all, I had more providers voluntarily offering their services for a piece of the action because there was enough activity going on. And the second, the more offers like that I received, the more I would push back, because the growth, as you know, comes at the end of the day down to your margins, what kind of margins you are able to maintain.
Yeah.
So therefore, liquidity you're generating, so therefore you can put that back in the inventory, because as you know, the real cost of, we talk about ROAS, we talk about takeoffs, 10%, 15%, all those things are things that you shoot for. But at the end of the day, for you to get a return on the inventory you invest already takes a lot of cash and a lot of time. So therefore, the last thing you want to do is share that revenue with somebody if you are a large operation. So when I became a provider, this is what I started to advocate for. So I said to people, look, and they would, just like me in my early days, they would say, why don't you do the work and then we'll do revenue share? I would say to them, look, you don't want somebody coming on board to do business with you, to do all their work, only to take a piece of the action when you don't have much to share with in the first place. So they are going to have to put in so much time to get you up there. So, and the time that will not be paid for. So they are now making an investment. So now you think about that. When you make $1 investment, you don't want to get $1 back, do you? You want to get $2, $3, and the higher the risk. So now you're going to overpay for those services at some point. Keep that in mind, number one. Number two, they are not angel investors where they will be prepared to wait for 5 years. They're going to want to get quickly. So they're going to do things in a way that will not be in your business's best interest in the long run. For example, ad spend. They'll push the ad spend high. They'll push the sales up. So I would say to them, be aware. I'm not saying don't do it, but be aware. What are the consequences? Understand better how they're going to do it and how long they're willing to wait. And the other thing is, if you are doing good business and somebody comes along and offers revenue share, do not take it, because you need every penny you generate in the liquidity to go back into the business. So be careful with these rev share deals. So what I came up with is something of a hybrid between how to pay and what kind of commitment to seek. So the payment is based on ad spend, because you, at the end of the day, have no control over the inventory they are supposed to have. So if you just bank on the sales, if they don't have inventory, you're going to do your work and then there's nothing to share. So, but ad spend is a different thing. You can do your work. However, have a commitment on the takeoffs. What it is that you are willing to commit to. And then if you don't stay within those commitment levels, you lose the job. Simple as a provider. So go on ad spend, but seek for commitment on the takeoffs, not ROAS, but takeoffs, because as you know, PPC also increases rank. So it would be unfair just to compensate on ROAS. So what is your take on my idea of approaching this fee structure?
I think it's okay. I think I don't, the way that I structure it is when I do the rev share, it isn't on top line sales.
Oh,
Right. So it's not on top line sales. It's only on ad sales. Right. So and it tiers down over time. Right. So like, let's say someone starts at, say 5%. So like the rev share it's 5%, but it's of ad sales. Right. And so what happens is in that scenario, you're not necessarily, no, you're not being encouraged. Like when you do it off of, I think the idea to have governors in place, say for tacos or ACOS or different things, like here are the metrics that govern the health of our relationship, right? And obviously, if we're too far outside of these parameters for too long, then, we aren't going to work together anymore. I think that's totally fair. When it's strictly on ad spend, what I find is, people just encourage you to spend more money, right? And working at Amazon, I mean, that's the whole job, right? So like Amazon is not your friend. I'll say it. I mean, Amazon is not your friend. And when Amazon thinks about their customers, they're thinking about the people that are buying the product. And unfortunately, unfortunately, Amazon does not see all of its selling partners as customers. It doesn't. And anybody who's been in the game for a while and has been called Amazon customer service or had an item suppressed or had their account suspended for something they didn't do, like understands that, Amazon's looking out for who they consider to be the customer, not the selling partner. But I think when it's strictly based on ad spend, people will encourage you to spend more. I think if you can create a model where, say, it's off of ad sales, then and it tiers down over time, then two things happen. One, it's strictly performance based. And two, much like a financial advisor, the way that I structure the fee structure is, as your asset levels go up, the fee comes down. So as your business gets better, we still work together. I still participate in the upside of the growth, but my participation level shrinks. Right. And so, so if you're generating, say, 100 grand in, ad sales, maybe I'm getting 1% or 5%, but if you're generating $1 million in ad sales, maybe now I'm only getting 1% or 2%. So it's like we get to participate in growth together. I'm still incentivized to help you, make your business better, but you're not having to lean in as heavy as that happens. So
yeah. Okay, cool. So I mean that's another model. Yeah, I like the idea of advertised sales. So I mean, for the listeners' benefit, this different types of sales, right? So when you're on Amazon, you pay for clicks, then either sponsored product, sponsored display, whatever the case may be. And then when somebody clicks on those and then makes a sale, that's called advertised sales. And of course, for every dollar you spend, you generate so much, and you can see that in your Seller Central. And the other one is people do search, and then your listing comes up organically, and they click on it, they go make a purchase. That doesn't count towards your advertised sales. That's your organic sales. So you want to be able to separate your advertised sales from your organic sales. We're not going to get into the whole reporting aspect of it, but you need to know exactly what those are. There is a third bucket that we keep an eye on, and that's the external traffic sales, which we track by using the Amazon attribution. So do you stay on top of that, Tony?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, it depends on, what you're doing. I think step one, right, is looking at ad sales and organic sales. That's certainly going to be the easiest thing to calculate. And that's, I think, step one. And looking at that ad sales ratio, right? The lower the ad sales ratio, theoretically, I mean, if your ad sales ratio is too low or too high, it could mean you're spending too little or too much. But typically what we see for a brand is that the lower your ad sales ratio, the higher your level of brand awareness and more people are coming and finding you naturally. I think, what you said around traffic that comes from external sale or sales that come from external traffic is very important to track. Because that's going to help you understand, where the best place to put a dollar is when you're investing in your business. And obviously using Amazon attribution to do that is going to be very important. But I think that is sort of phase 2, right? After your PPC is set up and you're gaining all the low-hanging fruit from, Amazon itself, right? Then step 2 is to set up all of your external traffic methods, and any external advertising that you want to do to send more, get that other oar in the water of sending more customers to Amazon.
Yeah. And by the way, for the listeners' benefit, I want to mention this here. So if you have a mailing list, you must set up an attribution code for it and then incorporate in your mailer, because that means that, and by the way, you must also enroll in the brand referral bonus program if you haven't already, because those two work together. So enroll in brand referral bonus program and enroll in the attribution program. And whenever you're sending out a mailer to your own customer list or your organic social media postings, whatever the case may be, incorporate your attribution links in it, because every dollar you generate from that traffic, you're going to get a percentage back from Amazon. So it doesn't cost you all this organic stuff, your own mailing list or organic postings. They will cost you nothing in terms of paid clicks, but they will pay you because Amazon pays for the external traffic being driven to your listing. So that's something I like to mention because people don't think about it. They always think about their paid stuff. So Tony, I want to ask you something. Can you share with us some practical tips on identifying a good talent for managing your PPC? What are the kind of questions that you want to ask? How do you verify that this is a good person?
Yeah, so when I go through an interview process, and we're looking for, let's just focus on skills, right? Obviously, personality fit and things like that are important, but let's say we're just trying to focus on, do I believe this person can do the job well, right? So when I go through the interview process, the first thing I talk about is I just ask them questions about Amazon. Right, do what is sponsored display, right? So I'll ask them about different ad types, and I a lot of people say, one thing that's interesting about our industry, it's kind of like, grilling in the backyard, in the sense that everybody thinks they're great at grilling in the backyard, and that isn't actually true, right? And so for some reason, there's a lot of people that seem to think they're PPC experts or that they're great with PPC, or at least make that claim, and that isn't true, right? And so I think the first thing I do is I'll ask, just very straightforward questions about different ad levers and key targeting methods, and basically thinking about campaign structure and construction, and how would you set up this. And I'll give them a scenario. I'll say I have a brand, let's say they're a consumables brand, and they have 12 items, their budget's $20,000 a month, and they're looking to get a return of 3 or better and increase their subscribe and save customers. How would you set up the campaign structure for that account, and where would you spend the money, right? And so I think those are the sort of the first questions that, yeah. So the first thing is just technical. How do things, what are the ad levers? What are the targeting methods? And just make sure they actually know what we're talking about. I mean, one time I interviewed a guy and I asked him what sponsored products was, and he didn't know. So, he came in and he said he was a PPC expert. I asked him what sponsored products was. He didn't know the answer. So obviously that wasn't true. And so it's good to just ask the basics. And then I think the second piece is around, ad strategy, campaign structure. And then the third thing I do is I talk to them about metrics. Right. And this one's really important, right? Because the first one is like, they can go get their ad certification, right? And learn what all the moving parts are. They can, I think somebody that's newer or learning from a mentor can put together maybe a halfway decent strategy or take one from somebody. But thinking about metrics, I think, is really where you see the intelligence of the person that you're working with. And with PPC, I think it's really important to look at metrics holistically. A lot of people get focused on ROI, and it's kind of like if I said to you, if we were on the phone and you couldn't see me, or if you're listening to this, right, and on the audio and you can't see what I look like, right? If I told you that I weigh 300 pounds, right, you're going to get this certain image in your mind, right, of what I look like. If I then tell you, well, I'm 6'7", and I'm a linebacker, and for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right, then you're going to get a totally different view. If I tell you I'm 300 pounds and then I tell you, well, I'm 5'2" and I'm 15 years old, you're going to get a very different image, right? And so I think a lot of folks, particularly when they're looking at this, they'll focus on, ACOS or TACOS individually. And I think that is a mistake. I think it's important to look at all of the metrics. I break the metrics down into 3 categories: performance metrics, which is typically where people focus, financial metrics, and then traffic metrics. And so what I do, even when I'm training my teams today, like when I'm doing training for my team or onboarding somebody who's new, I'll take them through a series of, quizzes or questions where I'll talk to them about when something happens, if metric A changes, what change does that trigger in metric B? Or if you see something, if metric A goes up, metric B goes down, and metric C stays the same, what is happening to the account, right? And so those types of questions let me understand that somebody has a really good command of metrics, how they move, and because that is going to determine the optimizations that one makes for an account, right? So understanding the metrics and how they move in accordance with the goal that the brand has set is going to determine the optimizations that somebody makes. And so I really want to understand how somebody thinks and what their problem solving ability is like. And so that third part of the interview, when we go through metrics, is really important.
Yeah. So this is what you said is so valuable. Metrics, you put them in 3 categories: performance metrics,
Yes.
financial metrics, and traffic metrics.
Yes.
Performance metrics are things like ROAS, TACOS, and others. Those are the ones that fall into that category.
Yeah, if I were to give you, if I were to say specifically, so if I'm looking at performance metrics, performance metrics would be TACOS is one, ACOS is one, cost per click is I consider that a performance metrics, and the ad sales percentage I'd consider a performance metric.
And financial metrics?
The financial metrics are going to be ad spend. Financial metrics are going to be ad spend. They're going to be ad sales. They're going to be total sales. Gosh, that was one more off the top of my head. I'm sorry. the last one is escaping me at the moment, but I have these all written down in my process. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Traffic metrics.
And traffic is going to be simple. It's going to be your impressions, your clicks, your it's impressions, clicks. It's going to be sessions, right? So you're obviously your organic, your click-through rate, and your conversion rate.
Conversion rate, yeah. So you put those under traffic conversion.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is so. We had an interesting scenario. So these are things that we track. But what happened was we track things over. We look at the last 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days, and all time. So we look at those numbers for those time frames, and then we had a client, and suddenly their 7-day took a nosedive. So you were talking about it's important for the person to understand the relationship between metrics so that they know what to do.
Correct.
And how they impact each other. You know, correct. Where else that knowledge becomes key to diagnose events as they occur, right? Because when something happens, you have no idea. So suddenly your takeoff shoots up. You have no idea how to look at it. So what we had was I put the metrics in different, if you like, bands of data. So one is about advertising, ad sales, and that's where we report the advertising and the ad sales. And then in the sales, we report the advertised sales, organic sales, external sales, and the total sales. So you can see all three brackets. And then what we do is we break down. So basically, advertised sales, we look at the clicks. External sales, we look at the clicks, and then organic sales, we look at the clicks. So and then we attribute the sales spread across organic, paid, and total. So what percentage of your organic sales, what percentage of your total sales were organic versus what percentage of your total traffic was organic?
Yes.
So we can see the correlation between is sales in line with the traffic. So things like that. So what happened was we found that the ad campaign actually performed even a little bit better ROAS. Conversion rate on the listing was actually a little bit better. But what happened was their share of organic sales dropped.
Yeah.
Even though the advertised sales were fine. And they were actually consistent across, all time as well as 30 days. It was consistent, but for that week, the organic share dropped. And then we very quickly realized that, maybe this is just for this week. So let's wait and see. So what do you think about the scenario like this?
No, I mean, I think this kind of thing happens all the time, right? Like you can see tacos go up, but ACOS stay flat or get better, right? And you're thinking, what's going on? And, it could be a couple different things. One, maybe somebody's spending more on branded sales and then, ad sales go up, they throw off the ratio. But again, many times, it's your organic sales are going to impact tacos to a large degree. And it can be positive and negative. Obviously, if organic sales dip, because Amazon is just getting less traffic, so let's say Amazon's getting less traffic overall, right? So if traffic goes down overall, you're still spending the same budget, so you'll still win the same number of auctions, roughly speaking, but there's just less overall traffic. Organic sales will be down, and your tacos will go up a little bit. Conversely, I can tell you in my the last several years of running big teams, there have been a couple different times where a brand manager hit a wrong button and it drastically lowered the price of a product.
Oh my
And
God.
and so they hit a wrong button. The price of a product goes to $1, and all of a sudden we sell out of that product in like a day or 2 days, right? And so what happens is we get this huge spike in organic sales, but it's all it's for naught. And you look and you're like, man, what happened? We have this huge revenue week, right? Or this huge revenue day. But that's why you have to look at everything, because it's like, oh, but we're not profitable because they sold this at less than half price, right? By accident, right? So there have been things like that I have seen happen accidentally over the years.
There's another thing that now that you mentioned it, I just realized another thing that you have to keep note of, and this is an ongoing thing, that you must at all times make a note of the significant events. For example, in this case, pricing was changed.
Yeah.
So you want to put that in your event calendar so that when you're looking at these numbers over time and you see these fluctuations, you want to be able to index them to certain events that you know of. For example, starting a PPC campaign, or stopping a PPC campaign, or changing bids drastically, or replacing your main image, or replacing your A+, or whatever the case may be. So all these things that doing an email campaign, and if suddenly you see a spike, and that's because you sent, I have a client, they have 400,000 emails on their mailing list. One email will immediately spike their sales. But if you look at it over time, well, you're going to see those spikes. You don't know what they are for. It's not going to tell you much. So you need to have an event calendar, so to speak, associated with the data. Right? Do you track?
It's super important. Like I remember, I can tell you, I have stories for days. Like I have a lot of campfire stories. Once we were working with this brand, and one of the items they sold was they sold these candles, these really high-end candles. And I forget what article it was, but there was some publication, and they printed an article about the top 10 items that Kylie Jenner keeps in her bedroom. And like item number 6 was this candle that we happened to sell, and we were out of stock in 40 minutes.
Oh my God.
Right. So like 40 minutes after they published the article, we were out of stock. And so it was one of those things where it's like, would have loved a heads up on that. But like you never know what is going to be the trigger. And when you do see something like that, I think you're 100% right. It's really important that you notate it, so that when you're looking at your business year over year and you're doing demand planning or thinking about how you're going to adjust your advertising budgets, you don't want to lean in on a false positive. So
yeah. Well, Tony, we can talk about this world forever, as far as the stories and about the knowledge. There's only so much to do. So let's wrap up the business talk. Now I come to the favorite part of our show, to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Take us way back to your beginnings. So in this part of the show, I'm always interested in peeling the layers of the onion, so to speak. What were your early life experiences that you now know that were the indications for what you're doing today?
I'll say I think I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. My dad worked in an auto factory. My mom was a secretary, and I'm the oldest of 3. It's interesting growing up in the Rust Belt. Like when I think about like Ohio or Cleveland in particular, one of the things I would say is I feel like, I think like Dorothy said, there's no place like home, right? So I always love being back. But I feel like it's, folks doing things the hard way on purpose. And I think it builds a lot of character being in the Rust Belt. when I was a teenager, my grandfather talked to me about investing. He was retired, and he told me, if you save a couple $100 a month every month from now until you're 65, you could have $1 million. And I was always fascinated with this idea of being a millionaire, right? Because yeah, I mean, I was not poor growing up, but we weren't rich, right? And I think a lot of people argue about money. I think that was a big argument for my parents. They ended up being divorced, and so like I was always fascinated with this idea of like, how do I become a millionaire, right? And I think there's only a handful of jobs. Like I think doctor, lawyer, high-end sales, and it's really only the elite folks in those roles that really become wealthy. And so 95% of all millionaires are business owners, right? And when I first graduated from college, I got involved with a direct marketing business, and there was this pamphlet that this guy wrote, and I forget his name, but the pamphlet was called like The Deception of the Corporate Dream, and it was talked about job stands for just over broke, and they pay you just enough not to leave, and it just resonated with me, of like spending all your time working on something that's like somebody else's dream, right? And so so for me, this idea of having a business was really important. So I ended up going to grad school, and I got my MBA in entrepreneurship, and I was a financial advisor for 10 years. I thought I wanted to get rich on Wall Street. Eventually I got sick of wearing suits and ties, and got into software, ended up working at Amazon, and now I'm here. But I think, for me, it's just been fascinating having a career where I'm surrounded by, entrepreneurs and really wealthy people, and the people that, the doers, I call them the doers, because we can go to any Super Bowl party, or any 4th of July is coming up, right? We can go to any holiday picnic, and half the people there are going to have ideas, right? They're going to tell you about they're going to give you a business idea or a product idea or a thing they want to do, and most people don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more, I wouldn't even call it 9 out of 10. I would call it like 99 out of 100 never take any action, right? So for me, everyone that, and there's something magic, I think, even if your account isn't big, right? Even if you're only selling $1,000 a month worth of product, right? Like I think the fact that you had an idea, you turned it into a thing, and hopefully your idea solves a problem for somebody, right? And you're now making that available to potential customers. I just think there's something really magic about that, and there's something really special. And so that's an environment that I wanted to be a part of, and those are the kind of people that I want to be around. And it's to me it's inspiring, and I don't, like I don't see us competing with each other, because there's plenty of ideas, right? There's plenty of ideas, and there's plenty of different ways, different problems that we all want to solve, and different ways that we want to serve. And so I think, being able to be in environments like this where we can share best practices, or get connected to people that can help us be more successful is really great. So yeah.
So, what was the reason that got you fascinated with the idea of being a millionaire? Well, so you were not poor, you were not rich, but there was no shortage of money. So I heard you mention your parents would fight about money. Was that the reason, do you think, or why did you become fascinated with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, when my parents got divorced, it changes your whole family, man. It changes your family, and it changes the trajectory of your life. And now, unfortunately, that's more commonplace, right? I mean, half the people on this call may be divorced or have been at one time, who knows? But I think, as a kid, yeah, I think it does something. And, I mean, in hindsight, was money the reason? No, but was it a factor? Sure. And, they say, the three biggest things that couples argue about are money, sex, and in-laws. And so
Yeah,
I was like, well, if I could be a millionaire, that at least takes care of the money problem, right? And
right.
so maybe that scratches that off the list. And I think I was just fascinated with this concept, and when you're a kid, you have no concept of money or how much, what is $1 million, right? But I had this idea that, man, if I could be a millionaire, right, I could do anything. And there's something about that. It's a milestone, and it's like, finishing a marathon or getting a PhD or, climbing Mount Everest. I think there's something about, being a millionaire, creating $1 million business it's really cool. And it's a milestone. And I think it puts you in a club. Like I used to say, there's people who have run marathons and there's people who haven't.
Yeah.
And I'd like to be in the club of people who have, right? I just would like to say I have, right? There's people who are millionaires and there's people who aren't. And there's a lot of millionaires that, are the average Joe that just, saved really well, right? And so, but I would like to be in that club. And I guess I thought, for me, particularly when I was younger, if that happened, I could insulate myself from a lot of problems. So,
Yeah.
whether
You
that's
know,
true or not, that was what I thought at the time.
Tony, there is a saying, there is a good in every bad, and there is a bad in every good. So in your situation, your parents' divorce put you in a mind, it was a bad thing, obviously. And it put you in a mindset that now placed you where you are today. You are with people, you are in that club, you are in an environment that you enjoy being in and you're good at. So it all came out of that unfortunate situation.
Well,
Right?
it does. I have a couple other buddies from the Rust Belt area, and we talk about that. We used to talk about this in college and in our 20s. It's like, what happens, it shakes your safety net, right? And so it shakes your social safety net, it shakes your financial safety net. And so, when you go through school and you go through your 20s, it's when it's like life is like walking a tightrope without a safety net. And so there is no, nobody's handed me cash to pay my rent or buy my first house or do any of the things, right? And so you got to figure it out. And I think that's how it is for most people. And I think what that did for me was, it was like, oh, my parents can't take care of me anymore. And alone they can barely take care of themselves, right? And so I need to figure out how to take care of myself. And if I can take care of myself well enough, right, that I have extra to help somebody else, that's a bonus. But it's this, I used to call this concept of, like, you go to different seminars, you go to, like, church gatherings or things, and there's all these folding chairs, and at the end, when everybody leaves, there's always like a few guys that are folding up and putting away all the chairs. And I was just like, if everybody just put away their own chair, this would go a lot. If everybody could just pick up and put away their own chair, this would be a lot easier, right? And and so I think that's what I focus on, is just really trying to be mindful of putting away my own chair, and if I can grab one or two others and carry them with me, that's great.
Well, I tell you, a lot of good things came out of that bad situation, and you are here as the proof for it. So clearly, it's your accomplishments, obviously, it's the proof. So that's a great conversation, Tony. And so tell us, how can people reach you? Share your contact information with us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tony Morales. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me there. I'll give you my personal email. It's Tony, Tony .Morales, Morales 26. So just a 26, TonyMorales.26 @gmail. If you want to give me an email, I'm happy to help anybody. If you just want to talk about your account, or if you're looking for somebody to mow the lawn for you, I'm happy to lean in and have that conversation as well.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, Nick. I really appreciate it. It was great.
And thank you. Before we wrap up, don't forget to visit www.getida.com/legends to learn more and sign up to claim money for your lost or damaged inventory with Amazon. Your first $400 in reimbursements will be free. www.getida.com/legends, and that's www.getida.com/legends. And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you on the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.